Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to attend the final of our webinar summer series. I am the conclusion. We've had two amazing speakers. We had Caitlin Capps talk, and as well as Taryn Humphreys. Caitlin went over the 7 stages of growth through adopting a continuous monitoring program. Taryn Humphreys went through the Alberta Alt-FEM programs and how successful it's been with our neighbors to the north. As for me today, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and I'm going to jump into our presentation. The key here today is to try to convey the value that our clients are finding from using a continuous monitoring solution. As for me, I've been working as an environmental petroleum engineer for the last 20 years in the Denver area, mainly in production and operations, a little bit of air quality as well. I am a first-generation college graduate. I grew up in Baytown, Texas on the Houston Ship Channel. The reason I'm an engineer is because of community outreach of the local refineries. The community is really focused around the refineries down there on the Houston Ship Channel. And everyone was very proud of the energy industry and the independence and luxuries, everyday luxuries that we get from it. I was really surprised in 2003 when I moved to Denver, Colorado, and realized that not everyone shares the same love for hydrocarbon extraction and refining. So that was a big shock for me to understand that not everybody understands the usage of hydrocarbons and why it's important to our security. So I've been personal advocate for our industry and for community outreach, because I think it's important that we continue to reach out to our communities and explain what we're doing and how we're continually evolving to become cleaner. I've been so proud of the impacts that I've been able to see and contribute to over the last 20 years around sustainability. You know, growing up in a fence line community, I've always been concerned about air quality, water quality, and taking care of the communities that embrace our industry the most. I was incredibly honored to watch Sarah Phillips take the stage at the Republican National Convention. I mean, how cool is that to see a petroleum engineer take the national stage and kind of promote our industry? If you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to listen to her talk. She definitely works towards our industry and makes the point that natural gas is precious. And natural gas is precious. Natural gas combustion is attributed to the significant improvement in our overall global emissions. There's even campaigns in place to help promote clean natural gas instead of using other sources of fire for cooking stoves, and to continue bettering human lives. But if natural gas is precious, which we all agree with as a petroleum engineer, it only makes sense to do our part and keep it in the pipe. And that's what we're going to go over today. Is this solution, continuous monitoring, it is also pro-industry. It supports our industry by supporting the notion that natural gas is precious. And by measuring methane, you're going to be able to determine if you have any product loss or if you have any leaks. Why Cube? Why Cube? Last year in 2022 and 2023, I was fortunate enough to co-chair the North Dakota Industrial Commission's Technical Solutions Group. In Q2 of 2023, we brought in all of the continuous monitoring technologies on the market, or at least the big guys, and had an all-day seminar with all of the operators in North Dakota. Both from that experience and from my personal interactions with Cube, I knew Cube had the superior product. The product that we have and the ability to integrate with oil and gas companies and midstream companies and how their operations are aligned with different key stakeholders really separates Cube in being a leader in this field. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get going on the presentation. So basically, the agenda today is to show the value of doing continuous monitoring. We'll talk about how the regulations are evolving, LDAR versus continuous monitoring and the new Quad OB regulations, the super emitter program, and then I'll summarize as well. There's 3 key takeaways I want to make sure everybody can remember from this presentation. One is that CM is proving to be an operating expense reduction with time with the emerging regulatory environment. So that's one big takeaway. 2 is it takes time to integrate continuous monitoring. I know we'd all love to show up and just install in 1,000 locations tomorrow, but realistically, it's not going to work, and you're not going to get the right stakeholders bought in at the right times. So you need to do this in chunks. So I would encourage you to get a pilot going if you have not already. And with that, I tell people to pilot with intent to expand. Engage those key stakeholders early and often. You want to get your operations teams, the first people, the boots on the ground that are responding, whether that's your LDAR team, your leak detection and repair. You want to get your air quality guys involved as well, and then your management and your ESG goals and your corporate alignment with where you're heading with that data. So those are the 3 key takeaways. Our core customer use cases with Cube, the biggest one is voluntary LDAR, just increasing the frequency of your LDAR. And we'll get into that in a little more detail. Today, we're going to spend a lot of the time talking about regulatory compliance. This is becoming more and more written into the regulations. It's in Quad OB. I expect it will be in a lot of the Quad OCs as the states start to write and adopt those. It's in Colorado Reg 7, and it just got passed on California State Bill 1137. Another driver for continuous monitoring has been methane reporting frameworks. We have several clients that are working with OGMP 2.0 or MIQ on trying to quantify and actualize the emission reductions. And from that, once you can do like a top-down, bottoms-up based on your emission inventory and what you're actually monitoring, people are tokenizing those environmental attributes. I've heard it certified natural gas. I've heard it differentiated. There's several terms there, but the idea is that now you have some type of credit or a token that is that environmental attribute for that MMBTU. And then that is something that they're anticipating to be able to trade on new markets. We see the EU methane intensity rules coming in that might be affecting our LNG stations and their need to quantify their emissions. We have the low clean fuel standards out of California. That's mainly for our non-oil and gas clients. We do biogas monitoring as well. And then the scope 3 markets, just the concept of some big company like Apple or someone like that needs to offset their emissions. And it makes perfect sense to me if they could somehow buy emissions from oil and gas. So I fully support that type of line. But a lot of our clients don't go all the way to OGMP. I would say the vast majority do not. But I did want to talk to that briefly. So let's jump into Quad OB. So we now have that passed and it's all new sites as of December 22. Tank batteries or facilities with more than a wellhead, you'll now be required to do quarterly OGI, which is a FLIR camera, most likely a FLIR camera. It does allow for continuous monitoring instead. So this is where the technology was actually written into the regulation. So you have to set a baseline within so many months of your operation, and then you monitor a 77 and 90-day rolling average. And if you hit a certain threshold above your baseline, then you have to do an investigative analysis. And now that investigative analysis is a key word there. You don't necessarily have to go out with the FLIR camera. You could pull up your SCADA information and see if you have pressures that align with the leak event and verify it that way. You could verify it AVO, audio visual olfactory. You could do method 21 with the wand, or you could do FLIR. So it really kind of opens the door to how you do that investigative analysis. From Quad OB, we expect that the states are asked to design their own Quad OC implementation plans by January of 27. I anticipate most states will follow the EPA's reg pretty closely because that's the minimum required. There is a few states that will try to be a little more stringent. You probably can guess at who those are. Another big thing to point out is the concept of high rate events. So we now have the super emitter program that is live as of May 7th. That is where third parties can report high emission events to the EPA on your behalf. They're allowed to use aerial surveys and satellites. Luckily, they are not allowed to use a truck and a camera. It would be a safety nightmare to have them running around in the field. Another piece in Subpart W reportable is the other large release events. And so right now, the way it is written is that if you have any events with an instantaneous rate of 100 kilograms an hour, that you will need to report it. That does exclude blowdowns. Now, this piece isn't very favorable to our technology or to our industry as a whole. And there's been a lot of lobbying by our groups, our support groups, on trying to get that revoked or put some more time around it instead of instantaneous, or maybe some more exceptions as well. Next, we have the Inflation Reduction Act and the waste emission charge. This is kind of convoluted. I'll do the best I can to it. Basically, if you have over 25,000 tons per year CO2e in a basin, or what Subpart W calls a facility, then above those thresholds, there's limits set by what segment you fall under. And then that ties to the waste emission charge. This does allow netting between your WEC applicable facilities. And so if you have facilities that are super clean with a low emission intensity or low methane, you can net out your higher emitting basins as well. I imagine if the WEC rule is not final yet, if it does become final, I imagine this will play into some M&A activities. There are exemptions in it: plugged wells, unreasonable regulatory delays, and if you do meet Quad OC standards, you're not applicable to the waste emission charge. There's a great slide deck the EPA put together on that. I referenced here, just wanted to put that out there. State regulations, monitoring plans. The big point here is that everything seems to be requiring a monitoring plan. You're going to have a watering plan for Quad OB if you want to use continuous monitoring. You have to have a monitoring plan for the state of Colorado, and will needs one for California as well. Right now, Colorado has 2 sections of their Reg 7 that fall within continuous monitoring. The first one was in play in 2021, and that is your pre-production, early production. You need to monitor so many days before to so many days after your operations. And that traditionally has just been VOC monitors. We have our first application with the state where we are going to use our methane sensors to meet that requirement, and we're very excited to be working with our clients on that. Another one that's coming up and starting this year is a state default intensity verification factor. A lot of people right now are going to use state emission factors to determine that quantity, but you have the ability to do an operator specified program. And what we see from our data is that if you're using continuous monitoring, you're going to have lower values than what the state is going to allocate based on their default factors. So other drivers for CM, just to hit on these again, I still think corporate risk mitigation and insurance is the #1 driver, protecting yourself against the super emitter event. Reconciliation for financial compliance, methane intensity targets, and then again, the clean fuel standards. LDAR versus continuous monitoring. All right, the challenges in existing LDAR workflow. So LDAR is leak detection and repair. So that's where you go out every quarter with a OGI camera and you scan the facility and look for leaks. Most of the time, since you haven't been there in 90 days, you're probably going to find something. You're going to send a crew out and they got to go scan it again to make sure. But there's no clear alignment between that and the goals of your company. And it doesn't really you're just doing the same thing over and over again. There's no real room for improvement. Here's a great example of how emissions vary temporally. This is a couple of tracks from our dashboard. The top one you can't read, but that's the quantified emissions. The bottom one is your ppm. And you can see if you took a snapshot at 3 different times, you end up with very different emission rates. And that's understandable because that's what we see in the data. But going out quarterly is just not really the best snapshot. The best analogy I've heard is that quarterly OGI is equivalent of sending a fire truck by your house every quarter to see if your house is on fire versus using a smoke detector to continuously monitor. So to prepare for a CM-driven Quad OB program, Again, developing that monitoring plan is something that we need to start on the front side with doing, and we've been helping operators get those up and running. You deploy your CM technology, you set a baseline site-specific emission rate for that site, and it tells you how to do that within so many days, and then you monitor your action levels. Now, when we take this prescribed methodology and apply it to historical data, we find that your number of LDARs are going to be cut down significantly. And this slide that I borrowed from Caitlin's webinar, if you were lucky enough to attend that, or I encourage you to attend it, or still listen to it. This shows that, like, here in the gray bar, this is how many OGI surveys you would do. And then the hashed gray is showing like your follow-up survey, because you almost always have to go back and verify the repair worked. Versus continuous monitoring, at first, you may end up having more alarms than your OGI because you're learning your facility and how to improve it. But with time, you will drive down your action levels because you have cleaned up all of the problems. And so in reality, you won't hit those 7 or 90-day action levels as your production decreases. This is my most favorite part of my job. I get to help train the pumpers, operators, LDAR crews, depending on how you're structured, how to use the dashboard and how to diagnose leaks. So I get to pull from my facilities engineering experience and help look at SCADA information and align it with the leaks. A good example of that is tanks. You know, if we have a leak on the tanks, I can pull up SCADA and see if there was a pressure loss on the tanks. We've seen it with lines as well. We've caught emissions on buried lines by looking at pressures. We've caught VRU operating parameter set points not optimized, again, by verifying data via SCADA. We've seen like bubbled poly pipe in the field that just went unnoticed, and we've been able to verify that and repair it. A lot of like dump set points on your separators, optimizing those, we'll find those too. Unlit flares or incomplete combustion on your flares. Incomplete combustion in totality. We have a CO sensor as well. So we have some people that want to see how their heaters, how are their combustors, how efficient are we actually being? So the super emitter program. One of the biggest drivers for continuous monitoring is that once you have the data, you're going to improve your site. I always think as when I was a production engineer, if you don't track it, you can't improve it. So, and this is the perfect example. Like once you start getting the data in, you will draw it down. Here is a count of super emitter events for one of our clients over 2 facilities. So in January of 23, they had 2 events. In February of 20, they had 8 events. 8 times where they hit that super emitter limit. But with time, they start to understand what is driving it, what behaviors are occurring. Are we doing loadout without equalizing our tanks? Is someone leaving the thief hatch open? Is it a pigging operation? There's a lot of human things that kind of go into this. But with time, you will drive that down. And that's really where that risk mitigation comes in. And we've seen this on the Alberta side as well. The energy regulators, they did this performance report, and they saw that if you did no inspections, you get the purple line of emissions. And if you do your minimum required OGI, I want to say that was 2 or 3 times a year, you get the yellow one. And then if you're using continuous monitoring, you're almost at 0 with just a few spikes. Again, it's driving that behavior with knowledge of the data. And this is a quick slide to kind of explain the potential monetary impact of the super emitter program. And so my experience with regulatory agencies are they're going to take, if they catch you at 100 kilograms an hour, they're going to assume that you are emitting at that rate until you can prove that you have data otherwise. And so if you're taking 90 days at 100 kilograms an hour and you apply the waste emission charge, you can see you're looking at potential fine of $260,000. Versus continuous monitoring, you're going to be alerted instantaneously of a super emitter event. And so even if it takes you 7 days to figure it all out and repair it, your potential fine is substantial because you now have a data set that acts as bookends and will protect you. So Benefits overall, it's evolving to become economic over your quarterly LDAR program. It is affordable insurance for your super emitter program as well. In case someone comes at you and tries to claim something, you have a better set of data to provide. And then it quantifies emissions for your corporate emission goals. If you have some corporate emission goals with time, this is a way that you can verify that. Cube, we are an end-to-end continuous monitoring solution. I'm so proud to be here. I think I've kind of iterated that at the beginning. Amazing group of people, individuals, and to be included in this webinar series with Caitlin and Taryn. It's been an honor. Our Axon devices, sometimes we'll just call them cubes. They're easy to install. They're very modular. All the components kind of pull apart in case there's any problem. They're easy to repair. Comes with an anemometer and a solar panel. We never have issues with the solar. We've deployed in several places in Canada, so I do get that question a lot. And then the anemometer data, we pull in, wind speed, wind direction, pressure, humidity, all of the good information. And then from there, it takes that and puts it into our cloud-based system, pulls into the cloud, and uses advanced analytics. And this is the key point for Cube. And I think for any of these technologies, it's been fascinating to see over the 20 years kind of the advancements in AI, neural networks, Internet of Things, all these different buzzwords. But the bottom of the line is we're getting better at using the data as we gather the data to model it more precise. So we are using a Gaussian plume model, and we are localizing each emission event, and then you quantify it. So localization is key because if you think about it, your sensors are getting some form of ppm, but you need to know where it's coming from before you can come up with a volume or an actual quantification, so you know that distance. And then the dashboard really sets us apart as well because of it's very user-friendly. It's very intuitive to go in there and look at your wind direction, look at where the emission's coming from, understand where the potential is, and utilize it. We do a lot of testing. We've done testing at METEC at Colorado State, and we have our own testing facility outside of Calgary as well. We were the first to be approved for AIM in Alberta, and we are also approved in New Mexico as well. We were planning our first Reg 7 pre-production application. We are planning on getting that approved. We've been talking with the state at the CDPHE. And then we've also submitted our application for the Quad OB and look forward to that event, getting that approval as well. All right, so the 3 key takeaways, let's see if y'all remember. 1, continuous monitoring is going to be economical over quarterly OGI with evolving regulations. 2, it takes time to integrate continuous monitoring. If you have not piloted, I encourage you to go out and pilot different technologies. I'm very confident in ours that we have one of the best. Please let us be part of your pilot. And then you can think about how you want to expand. And then pilot with the intent to expand. Again, getting those stakeholders in, get them in early, help them understand the potential benefits, because it helps a lot of different organizations or different people within the organization. So make sure you get those alignments as well. All right, thank you. That concludes it for today. Thank you so much for attending and taking this time. I really appreciate it. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Braxton.